Hello. Hello everyone. So we're going to be starting out with our chapter number 7, that is your laws relating to crime and procedure. So this chapter is all of your criminal laws. It includes your BNS as well as your BNSS. For students wondering what the BNS and the BNSS is, it is a replacement of your IPC and your CRPC. So what was the erstwhile IPC? IPC was known as the Indian Penal Code. It was the substantive law governing criminal laws in our country, whereas your CRPC governed your procedural laws, again relating to crime in our country. Currently, our IPC and our CRPC has been replaced by the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023, that is your BNS, and your Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita 2023, that is known as your BNSS. One more law which has been replaced currently is your Indian Evidence Act, which is currently known as your Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam 2023, or otherwise I'll also in short form we can call it the BSA 2023. So let's try to understand a little bit about the criminal law and how it works in our country. As I had mentioned over here, we have the BNS and the BNSS. So the BNS governs all of your substantive provisions, whereas the BNSS provides the procedure in which to carry out your BNS. So say for example, if an offense is being defined in the BNS, then the procedure to execute that offense or execute the persons committing that offense is governed by the BNSS. Okay, so let's do a little bit reading of what exactly the BNS, the BNSS, the BSA, etc. Aim to do. The new laws were introduced in the year 2023. It has been enforced from the year 1st July 2024. They replaced the earlier criminal laws, that is your IPC, CRPC and Indian Evidence Act, because even to an extent those laws are what we call as colonial legislations, in the sense that they were formed at the time the Britishers were still in colonial rule over our country. The laws aim to modernize definitions, address new forms of crime such as cyber offenses, organized crime, and also make the legal system more aligned with the realities of our social and technological world. It does bring in a welcome move, that is your community service as punishment, refines your terrorism and sedition laws, and to an extent removes all the obsolete offenses which no longer have a place in our current society. So the whole aspect of BNS is to be more accessible, relevant and efficient in our current Indian criminal justice system. So first let's try to understand what exactly is a criminal offense. A criminal offense is a wrong in society, or otherwise a wrong to society, where offenses can be committed against a person also, where someone can break certain rules and cause harm to another person. So where such wrongs are committed and it is defined under our BNS, we can say that that amounts to a criminal offense. Now the definition of crime is always to be defined only by the state. That is, if it was an individual right that was being violated, we already saw that is being governed under our law of torts. Whereas crime is, while a crime can be committed against an individual, it is generally what the state defines as a crime is a crime or is a criminal offense. So this concept of crime will keep on changing from time to time, and we consider criminal offenses as a wrong against the society because of how severe and grave in nature these offenses are. Now, even though the offense was committed against a single individual, the nature of the offense is so big so as to affect everyone in the nearby vicinity, so as to affect society itself. And that is why they'll say that crimes are committed against society, whereas torts are committed against individuals. Again, we go into a little bit about the BNS, that's the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023. As mentioned earlier, it is a substantive law of crimes. It defines acts which constitute an offense and lays down the punishments for the same. Okay. Now, the word offenses is not defined under, the word crime is not defined under the BNS, but the word offense means a thing which is punishable by the BNS. So, the word offense, crime, etc. is to be used interchangeably, but the reason why we don't use the word crime is because we will normally say that a person has committed an offense. If he is found guilty of that offense, then we will say that he has committed a crime. So every person accused of an offense is merely an accused and will only be proven guilty in a court of law. Once he is proven guilty in a court of law, we can say that he has committed a crime. Now, the Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita, or the BNSS 2023, is meant to consolidate and amend the criminal procedure. It replaces your CRPC and brings about a much more efficient system or process for the purpose of entertaining all judicial processes addressing offenses. It tries to address things like delays, redundancies, complexities in the earlier framework, and so as to provide much more better, efficient systems, and also while improving transparency. So the objective of the BNSS is to streamline the procedure, to make the procedures much more efficient, and also while making the legal system much more accessible for citizens while maintaining justice and equality. Whenever we look at any law, the very first question that you should question or ask is, what is the jurisdiction of this law, or what is the extent and the scope of this law. So when we are looking at the BNS 2023, we look at jurisdiction or the applicability of this law from two aspects. The first one is known as an intra-territorial jurisdiction, and the second one is known as an extraterritorial jurisdiction. Now, intra-territorial jurisdiction is governing all of the crimes or all of the offenses which are taking place in the territory of India. In intra-territorial jurisdiction, there is no differentiation between whether a citizen has committed the offense or whether a foreigner has committed the offense. Regardless, if the offense was committed in the territory of India, then we will call that as an intra-territorial jurisdiction, and by virtue of the BNS, our criminal courts will have the power to try all offenses of this nature. So, intra-territorial jurisdiction is the exact opposite of extraterritorial jurisdiction. Extraterritorial jurisdiction is governed under your sections 1 clause 4 and 1 clause 5, wherein they try to say that if an offense is committed outside of India by any citizen of India, then the jurisdiction of our criminal courts will also apply to those offenses which took place outside of India. So let's do a reading of section 1 clause 4. It states that any person liable by any law for the time being in force in India is to be tried for an offense committed beyond India shall be dealt with according to the provisions of the BNS for any act committed beyond India as if it had been committed within India. So they are saying that any person is liable to be tried for an offense committed beyond India. So this is now exceeding the territory of the country. Okay, and we will treat it as if it is being committed in India itself. Now, section 1 clause 5 of the BNS says that the provisions of BNS shall also apply to any offense committed by any citizen of India in any place beyond and without and beyond India. That means if a citizen goes abroad and commits an offence according to our BNS, then once he comes back into India, he will be tried for that offence. Any person on any ship or aircraft registered in India, wherever it may be. I will also call this as admiralty jurisdiction. It is a concept where a ship or an aircraft can sometimes travel along beyond the territorial waters of any country. And when they are traveling in these high seas or on international waters, then if a crime is committed on that ship or on that aircraft, then they will say that if that ship or aircraft was registered to India, then any offences committed on that ship or aircraft can be tried by our courts in India according to the BNS. Any person in any place without and beyond India committing an offence targeting a computer network or a computer resource located in India. This provision goes on to punish any person. They need not be an Indian citizen, they need not be just a foreigner, they can be any person who is attacking a computer resource in India will be tried by our criminal courts. So if you look at it, our extraterritorial jurisdiction gets its power from 1 clause 4 of the BNS, which says any person can be tried for an offence under our BNS even if it is committed beyond the territory of our country. It applies to any citizen, it applies to any person committing an offence on any ship or aircraft registered to India, as well as any person targeting a computer resource in our country. In the case of BNS, they're saying that if we have to make a short form of our jurisdiction, first and foremost, it applies within the territory of India. It also applies any place beyond and without and beyond India. In the sense, this is section number 1 clause 4. Any person, ship or aircraft registered in India wherever it may be, it is 1 clause 5. And any person targeting a computer resource, again section 1 clause 5. Now what happens if a foreigner did not know that he was committing a wrongful act, since that act is not an offence in his own country? Okay, I'll repeat the question. If a citizen did not, or a foreigner did not know that that offence was an offence in our country because it's not an offence in his own country, how will our courts react to such a situation? They answered in Mubarak Ali Ahmed versus State of Bombay, wherein they said that if a foreigner or a non-citizen did not know he was committing the wrong, since the act is not an offence in his own country, then it will still be an offence, or he will still be punished under that offence, because this follows the principle that ignorance of law is not excusable. Okay, so regardless, ignorance of law is not excused, and you have to be aware. Even if you are not aware, it will still be considered an offence. Now, some people are exempted from the territorial jurisdiction of our Bharatiya Nyaya Suraksha, that is the BNS. The proceedings against your president and governor is protected by virtue of Article 361 clause 2 at any time that they are holding office in our country. The heads of state of foreign nations or foreign governments are also exempt from criminal proceedings in our country. And not just the heads of foreign states, but also the ambassadors, diplomats, etc. of foreign countries who have an official status in our country. Okay, so these three groups of people are exempted from the jurisdiction of BNS by virtue of whether it is Article 361 or an exemption under our criminal laws. Now that we've understood what exactly is the jurisdiction of our BNS, BNSS, including the BSA, we now come into what amounts to the fundamental elements of a crime. Now, for a crime to take place, they say that there are three essential requirements which are there. The first requirement is a human being. Now, this human being must commit some kind of an activity, which we will call as an actus reus, and he must have the guilty mind to have committed that wrongful activity. So, only a human being can have the guilty mind to commit that wrongful act which amounts to an offense. And hence, that is the very first element that we have, that is a human being. Generally, a human being is required to have committed that offense because only he is under a legal obligation, or he is the only one who is capable of committing a crime under law. But what we must also understand is that the human being is not always the perpetrators of crime. It can even be a computer resource which can be a perpetrator of crime or be the victims of a crime. And similarly, the human being is not always only the victim of crime, it can even be other factors such as your computer resources. The second one, we have mens rea. We are going back to the same legal maxim that we had studied in Law of Torts, that is known as actus non fecit reum nisi mens sit rea. The sense that there is no activity is a wrongful act unless it is accompanied by a guilty mind. And so mens rea is a very, very essential element to constitute a criminal liability. In fact, it is so important that mens rea is provided or mens rea is proved before an accused can be held guilty. I'd like to introduce you all to one sentence. In criminal cases, the accused must be proven guilty, that is, you must prove mens rea beyond all reasonable doubt. That means the level of mens rea that is required to be proved is so high, and only if that mens rea is proved can a person actually be considered as a person guilty of that offense. Now, if you look at mens rea itself, there are different stages of mens rea. Some might require a higher level of proof to be given, whereas some require a lower level of proof to be given. Now, if we have to look at the concept of negligence, what is negligence? Negligence is an activity where you have a duty of care, but you have not taken that care. So, say for example that a lifeguard is supposed to save the life of a child, but instead of jumping into the pool to save the drowning child, he was just sitting on his phone and looking at his phone. Now, here the lifeguard has a duty to enter into the pool and save the drowning life, but he didn't do so, and that is what we call as negligence. To a certain extent, I can even say that when you are driving on the road, you have a duty of care to all the other drivers on the road as well as to the pedestrians walking on the road. Okay, and beyond that also, if you do something wrong, if you jump a red signal, if you drive without a helmet, then we can call these as negligence. Obviously, the example that I am giving you right now attracts a civil fine. In terms of criminal liability, when we talk about negligence, it will obviously have a higher effect. Now, recklessness is an activity where the person doing that activity has no care for the consequences. In the sense that if a person is driving at 200 kilometers per hour on the roads, then we can call him reckless. Not only is he negligent, but he is also reckless, because a person driving at 200 kilometers per hour on the road is likely to hit someone or something, and the probability of that happening is very, very high. But where the person does not care for the consequences, we can say that that person is being reckless. Now, the level of mens rea to be proved over here will be much lesser, because his actions itself will speak in more words than his guilty mind. So, while mens rea is not used in the BNS, the words are usually understood by the presence of the following. That is, if you see the word intentionally, voluntarily, fraudulently, dishonestly, maliciously or knowingly, then you automatically know that they are referring to mens rea within the provision itself. So the word mens rea will never be found anywhere, rather it will be found in the use of the following words. Now in some cases mens rea need not be proved. In what are they? Where the statute itself imposes liability, the presence of an absence of a guilty mind is irrelevant. In some cases, the statute will impose a fine with the intention that no mens rea has to be proved, but rather an instant fine or liability is placed on the person because they might be petty offences. Now the same thing applies in the second case, where the penalties are petty fines and proving mens rea is not easy. For example, driving on the road without a helmet, driving without your driver's license. Here, the level of mens rea need not even be proved, or it is very petty fines over here. So therefore, even without proving guilty mind, they will punish you. In the interest of public safety, strict liability is imposed. Now, if you have to remember, we had studied strict liability in the case of Rylance versus Fletcher, wherein the court had clearly said that we will not even look at the mental element, and rather we will impose a strict liability on the persons involved. And the last one, ignorantia juris non excusat, meaning ignorance of law is no excuse. Okay, so a person cannot come out and say that I had no knowledge of this law, or I had no idea about this. Ignorance of law is no excuse, but ignorance of fact is excusable under law. And the third aspect is actus reus, that is the act or the omission itself. Now obviously, having a mental element itself is never enough unless the wrongful activity has also been committed. So actus reus means the act or the omission which must be carried out. Is it possible for a corporate body to have mens rea? In the sense that a corporate body is nothing other than a legal fiction. That is, it is a fictional character that has been given a legal status. So this fictional character is not going to have a body, a brain, arms and legs to carry out any kind of a wrongful act, or even have the mens rea to carry out such an activity. So for the longest time, we were told that companies are not capable of having mens rea, and if they are not capable of having mens rea, then they cannot be punished for the crimes that it commits. But over time, the court has gone ahead to lift the corporate veil and impose a criminal liability on the management behind the company. That is a group of people who guide the company, whether it's the directors, the KMP, the persons having influential control over the board. These are the persons who will be liable under the criminal laws, even though the criminal activity was done by the company itself. Now, crime does not happen just instantly like that. There are many stages to the commission of crime. We look at the four main stages, that is, first and foremost, we have the guilty intention or the criminal intention. Only when you have an intention, you can actually carry out your activity. So once you have set a criminal intention, the next would be to prepare for that crime. Whether it is the action of committing forgery, or whether it's the action of committing sedition against the state, or committing murder, or even a simple act of committing nuisance in society. There is going to be a preparation stage, in the sense that you have to acquire the materials, the objects, say the murder weapon or the forgery equipment, etc. Then comes to the actual attempt, because you need to attempt it first, and when you attempt it, there is a chance that you succeed or you fail. So if you succeed, we'll call that as a commission of crime, but then if you fail, you will simply be punished for the attempt of that offense itself. So these are the 4 stages of commission of crime. Now obviously it stands to state that at the commission of crime you will be punished for that offense. But our criminal law looks a little beyond that and states that even if you have attempted the crime, that is, you've taken the effort to go and do it, but you may not have succeeded, even then there is a chance that you will be punishable under this act. Having a criminal intention is not actually punishable under law, because a criminal intention is merely a mental element. Every day, I guarantee you that there are many people who wake up having some criminal intention in their minds, but then they don't actually carry out that activity. They might just be having a bad day and they might think of killing a person, or some extremely colored ways to commit any kind of an offense against a person. I may be angry with my parents, or I may be angry with my friends. I may even think of committing an offense against one of them. But these are all just thoughts. These are thoughts which will vanish in a matter of few minutes or a matter of few hours, or the minute I am distracted. Hence, they are saying that a criminal intention is not punishable under law. Because every day, every person has some criminal intention in their mind. But a criminal intention is required to prove the actual commission of crime. So while simply having the intention is not punishable under law, but coming to the preparation of that crime could be punishable. But what our criminal justice system says is that it believes that a human being is actually incapable of crime, that something must have motivated them, or something must have pushed them towards the actual commission of a crime. So it is always believed that human morality and justice will always step in before a person actually commits that offense. Okay, so generally under law, even the preparation stage is not actually punishable by law. Now, what do you mean by preparation? They are all the necessary activities required for the commission of that criminal act. Now, even preparation is difficult to prove, because how do you exactly show preparation? Now, if you have a person who's walked into a store, bought a knife, and then you see a CCTV camera wherein he's seen walking to that person and then stabbing that person, then okay, you have your evidence. But otherwise, it's highly unlikely that you are aware of the preparation stage itself. So even preparation is not punishable under law, but there are certain exceptional cases over here. For some extremely high or serious offenses, the simple act of preparation itself is punishable by law. What are they? One, we have preparation to wage war against the government. Waging war against the government can be a full military war against the government, or it can be any form of terrorist activities also, which we'll call as waging war against our government. So simply by collecting people, collecting material, taking out the necessary instructions and the ammunition to attack the country, these are all preparation. While the act has not yet been committed, it will still be punishable. The second one is preparing to counterfeit coins or government stamps. So by holding the machine required for making counterfeit coins or even government stamps is punishable. The third is possessing counterfeit coins, forged documents, false weights or measurements. Simply the act of possession itself can get you punished at the preparation stage. And lastly, we have preparation to commit dacoity. Dacoity is nothing other than armed robbery. Okay, so while criminal intention is not punishable, preparation is also not punishable with the exception of the following 4 points. Next we come to the actual attempt. Now when an attempt is committed, there is a 50% chance that he succeeds and there is a 50% chance that he does not succeed. But what we can establish over here is he's moved past the intention stage, he's moved to the preparation, and he's actually gone ahead to commit the crime. And hence attempt is also punishable under law in many scenarios. Now, if you have to look at our BNS, there are 4 different categories in which attempt is punished under law. The first scenario, the offenses are extremely serious. Hence, they will say that the punishment for offense and the punishment for commission of the crime will be the same. So, if the commission of the crime attracts 10 years imprisonment, then simply by attempting the same also can grant you a 10-year imprisonment. Again, remember, these are for extremely serious offenses such as waging war against the government, sedition, dacoity, etc. In the second scenario, a separate punishment will be given for offense. So, for example, if an offense for cheating is given, then the attempt for cheating will be given as a separate punishment. The third one is attempt to commit suicide or compel or restrain from applying or restrain of lawful power specifically under section 226 of the BNS. Now, why are they saying attempt to commit suicide? Committing suicide is actually a criminal offense, but the mere attempt of it is punishable because once the attempt is accomplished, then there is no point in punishing a dead person. But the activity of taking away your own life is actually punishable by law, and also you cannot waive away your fundamental right to life. So you cannot give consent towards actually taking away your own life. So any kind of attempt to commit suicide is also punishable under a separate provision under the BNS. And lastly, if a provision has the punishment for the actual commission of the crime but does not have any provision for attempt of the same offense, then we will say that it's governed under section 62 of the BNS. It says that in such a case, the punishment for attempt is 1/2 of punishment of the longest sentence for that offense. So say for example the longest sentence for that offense is 10 years, then the maximum sentence for attempt will be half of that punishment, that is up to 5 years will be punishable for the offense. And then lastly we have the actual commission of the crime itself. Once the crime is committed, then obviously we know that he has succeeded in committing the crime, and accordingly he will be punished for in the provisions of the BNS.